Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Guidebook Friday for October 19th, 2018. Today, we're mostly going to talk about the planner stage, which I shared earlier in our Slack group, and I will share on this screen here. Start by sharing my window here. So we've been working on the BFF stage to kind of make sure we're committing to something, that we're ready to move on. I shared some of my responses here, and Rebecca shared hers. So let us know how this went for you all. So I got to the commitment part and was ready to commit to my idea for NaNoWriMo. I'm still looking forward to figuring out exactly what that means, but there's still a little time and space to figure out what the outline and structure of my story is going to be. So I'll talk about that some today. So, but this made me excited and ready to keep moving on. So today we're going to talk about the planner stage, which is where we really get a good understanding of what our project is, maybe even make a prototype or outline or something that, a plan that we can work from. Maybe put it on a calendar, depending on what kind of project it is. So we'll go through each of these boxes in turn. So this is a good time to really get a good definition on a project. If you haven't already, this is a good time to really state it as a defined goal or a vision, with a deadline, with a budget. These are, the deadline and the budget are surprisingly helpful. Even in, one of the things about creative projects is that often they're kind of something that we're doing on the side, something that we're doing as a hobby, and it can be hard to get it done, because it's supposed to be fun, and that's good. We tend to just keep playing around with the idea, or maybe just letting it go because we haven't structured it. But if you put a deadline on something, even something that you wouldn't ordinarily think of something that needs a deadline, suddenly your project has all this energy because you're wanting to work to get it done at the time that you set for yourself. And a budget can also have a similar way of making a structure around something and help you make the decisions. So oddly enough, it can be more helpful to have a kind of restricted budget than it is to say, oh, I'll just spend what I know when I need to, when I do it, and then that doesn't give you any structure, whereas a budget really gives you something to work with. Sometimes it can be helpful to just think about how many hours this project is going to take and where that would fit in. I often find it ridiculously useful to name my project in some way, just because if I've named it, then it's something that I can refer to. It's something I can write on my to-do list. It has to have a name so that I can identify it and focus on it. And it can be really simple. My name right now for my NaNoWriMo project is Nano 2018. That's enough for me to know what it is I'm working on, what it means when I see it on a to-do list. It's the name of the file on my computer where I'm keeping my notes. So then we can look at the drawing board, which is the kind of place, this is kind of referring back to the dabbler stage where we were playing around with our idea. So this is more about taking that play and that creativity that was happening in that kind of way and being a little more committed to it. So I think I actually showed bubble charts back when I was doing the dabbler stage, because I often draw one during the dabbler stage when I'm trying to figure out how to work backwards from the goal that I want. When I'm doing it in the planner stage, the bubble chart is often more about exactly what I'm going to do and when I'm going to do it. And that can be a really helpful tool, but so can a list or a mind map, especially a mind map that maybe has dates on it. This can be a good time if you were playing around with ideas and didn't commit to one in the dabbler stage for a theme or a song or a playlist, something along those lines. This can be a good time to commit to what this project is going to look like in your life. Depending on the kind of project, this would be, a time to create a prototype, perhaps. So if I have a creative project that I want to paint hibiscus flowers in my bathroom, this would be the stage where I would paint a hibiscus flower on paper so that I know kind of what it looks like. Or maybe I'd paint several so I have something to choose from. This would be a good time to figure out what it is I mean by hibiscus flower and what it would look like. On a formal paper for a class, an outline is still in a really good way, especially something that's going to be in an academic environment where it's going to get graded and professors have done things from outlines forever. That could be a really helpful thing. For something less formal like NaNoWriMo, that's a little too formal for me. And I'll show you what I used last year, and it's more along the lines of a list than an outline, but still helps me figure out how to do things in order. This is also a good time. Back in the dreamer stage, we talked about choosing containers or having boxes or files or the virtual equivalent of boxes and files. But this is a good time. Sometimes by the time I get to this stage, those are no longer adequate. And this is a good time to think about that for a second time and see what it is it's going to take to get me through November. So I'm going to show a couple of things that I did last year for NaNoWriMo and this for drawing board type activities. I showed this earlier, a few weeks ago. The Blake Snyder beat sheet from Save the Cat is a way of structuring a story that I find really helpful. And so I will probably fill out a worksheet like this, which gets me my kind of turning point scenes for my novel. And that's probably one of the first things that I'm going to do in the next week as I'm coming into the planner stage to figure out where the turning points are. And then when I have that, and I still have my 100 list from back in the dabbler stage, I'll start thinking about, I may do what I did last year, which is I made a spreadsheet. Let's see if I can make this. So this is, I'll share this on the Slack group so you can read it a little better. So I had scene numbers, and last year I did 60 scenes in this spreadsheet. My idea was if I wrote 1,000-word scenes, I'd have 60,000 words, and that's 2,000 words a day in November. And that gives me plenty of slop. So if I don't quite make it, I'll probably still get to 50,000 words. So if I'm aiming for 60,000 words, I'll get to 50,000 words. So that's what I played with last year, and it worked for me. I'm not sure if I'm committed to that this year or not, but that's how I did it last year. So I had a scene number. I had the Save the Cat structure. So it starts with the opener, and then by the second scene already needing to get the theme stated. And by the fifth scene, I needed to get my setup finished up. And so this was telling me where I was in the Save the Cat structure. And then I had a column for setting, one for characters. And this was something I found oddly useful, was to have, I actually put in parentheses the number of scenes these characters have been in. My novel was such that Abby was my main character and she was in every scene because it was focused on her point of view. But I wanted to kind of balance out what my other characters were. I didn't want to have any character that only appeared in one scene. I wanted them to come back again. And So my kind of major characters I expected to appear in a certain number of scenes and minor characters in another number. And so I actually counted the scenes as I was in parentheses here of the characters that were in there. And that was kind of a useful way to use that spreadsheet and make sure I got all my characters were appearing. Then a description of the scene. And then I was trying to make sure that I was getting in some things about my characters and about the plot. And so I made notes for each scene on motivations and on the confrontation in the scene. I think I mentioned in Slack this week that I'm not very good with conflict. And so it was useful for me to have this column so that I made sure every scene had some kind of confrontation in it. And wasn't just writing pretty settings and not really talking about having anything active happen. And I played around with the idea of having a mood for each scene. That was not as useful as I hoped, but I might play with that again this year. And then I was thinking about an emotional change. So if a scene started in one emotion, I wanted it to end in a different one. And this was kind of the same thing as confrontations. Make sure something really happens in a scene. And so that was a useful spreadsheet for me, and that's probably, I'll do something similar to that, I think, for this NaNoWriMo. It felt less formal to me than outline, although looking at it this way, it looks kind of formal, but when I was filling it in, I was filling in, this box here, and then maybe I'd think about something clear over here, or, way down some other scene. I think I actually started with the save the cat structure scenes and then filled in the ones in between. So it didn't come together in a really like a formal way like an outline does. So then we get to this identification box. And here I'm looking to make sure, before I dig into getting this project done, I want to make sure that I've identified the skills, the ones that I have, the ones that I don't have and want to develop. And if I need to develop skills, I want to make a plan to learn and practice those skills. So this is my 7th NaNoWriMo, and I'm feeling like I've got enough skills to do that. But if I was to go back to the idea of painting hibiscus flowers in my bathroom, I have like Zippo skills for painting or drawing even, really limited. And so I would want to make a plan so that I could learn and practice those skills so I felt some confidence when I actually started putting paint on the walls. And so I could start by drawing hibiscus flowers with pencils, or playing with paint on paper instead of, and practicing it every day until I got my brush skills developed and felt like I was really confident. And then resources, we talked about resources clear back in the dreamer stage. And so this is a good time to revisit that and make sure, are there resources that I want to look at, read, watch before I get going on this project? Are there questions that I want to answer? That can sometimes, one of my problems with resources is that I could spend all my time with resources and never actually get around to doing the project. But if I have actual questions to answer, that gives my resource discovery process some real focus. And so instead of just learning about London in the 18th century, which I could spend years, if I have a particular question like, what were the streets like in London? Or what was this particular, what business was in this particular building, and who ran it, and what kind of customers did they have? So if I had questions like that to answer, that really focuses my research so that I don't spend too much time just exploring and actually get some questions answered that will be useful for my project. And this is a good time to identify any needs that I have. So if I were doing that painting project, well, I'd need to be thinking about paint, and I might need to figure out some things. I might need to go to my resources to figure out what kind of paint I would want to use. And this is also a good time to think about what's likely to go wrong. So for NaNoWriMo, I am likely to have a day where I don't meet my word goal. And so I want to think about that as an obstacle and what the path around that obstacle is, so that I don't get discouraged. So just not making my word goal on a particular day is not a bad thing, especially in the beginning of the month, because there's plenty of time to catch up. And so I want to think about, well, could I use my Saturdays or my Sundays as a day to catch up on my word count, or make some plan so that I get ahead. I have done that some years where I'll write 2,000 words a day for the first 10 days and feel like I'm got a little room to maneuver. So that can be a useful thing to think about, is what's going to go wrong and how can I get myself around the problems that I'm likely to face. Then let's think about structures. I've talked about this a little bit already today. I'm amazed how useful it is to have some kind of structure in place to make things happen. I claim that I want to do something, but it just kind of sits there until I design some kind of structure that makes me do it, that makes it fun or makes it easy or makes it just that there is a certain expectation there. If I just say I want to do this thing, it will never happen. But if I say I want to do 10 minutes of this thing every day, then the thing will start happening. So this is the time to think about that. Now, NaNoWriMo, if you're doing that, comes with stone structure. You're going to write a certain number of words a day to get to 50,000 words. And that's enough structure for me. But you could think about organizing certain projects. We could think about taking a class, depending on the project, or designing your own class that gets you through a project. Rewards can sometimes be helpful. I really get a kick out of putting up my daily word count on the NaNoWriMo site. I also often put it up on Facebook, which is just kind of fun, so my friends can keep track of where I am. Sometimes you can design a retreat or a camp structure of some kind that says, so like thinking about day camp is, maybe you're there from 9 to 12 in the morning and you work on crafts for 1 hour of that time, and you work on canoeing for 1 hour of that time. And so you can kind of design your day around projects for a limited amount of time. So for 1 week, I'm going to focus on my 2 projects of NaNoWriMo and painting hibiscus flowers on my bathroom wall. And so maybe I devote the mornings to NaNoWriMo and the afternoons to hibiscus flowers, and I do that for 1 week. That could be a kind of camp-like structure that might be fun for me, and kind of carve out some time, because if I'm doing those 2 things, I'm not going to have time for anything else. So I need to let everybody know that I'm not available because I'm painting hibiscus flowers on my bathroom wall. Or maybe I don't tell them that. So, but these can find really nice, build some time into your life to get a project done. It's another time to think about containers for a project. I think I misspelled calendar. There's no spell check when you're drawing these things, so I'll have to check on that. A calendar is a really good structure all by itself. Sometimes I can just plan something on the calendar, and that's what makes it happen. Or having a log can be, if I'm writing in a log every day, I'm probably going to work on the thing so that I have something to report into my log. So that can often be a useful structure for me. Wanted to share you, people make calendars every year for NaNoWriMo, because you want to start with your 1,667 words, and then the second day you're going to get to 3,333 words. And halfway through the month on the 15th, you're going to get to 25,000 words. And that gets you to 50,000 words. So people make calendars every year to help NaNoWriMo folks know what word count they should be on in order to be on track. This one was, I just enjoyed this one. It was had kind of funny little pieces of advice for the calendar. So here's one that says, in the name of all that is pure and good, don't read your novel so far, which is really good advice. In NaNoWriMo, it's meant to be, get the words out. It's not meant to be something where you're writing anything good or that you would necessarily want to read while you're in the midst of it. Here's one that says, just don't panic, right here at the end of the month. And then the next day it says, okay, now you can panic. So these are kind of fun. If you go to the forums in NaNoWriMo, I'm pretty sure there's going to be one that's going to have calendars available for people, because some people just get a kick out of making these calendars and then make them available for use. I have some years printed one out and put it on my wall. Some years I printed one out and kept it on my desk, and then I could check it off as I, make a big check mark when I get my 1,667 words that first day. I think last year when I was kind of had a goal for 2,000 words a day, I actually made my own calendar so that I had my 2,000 words a day, so I could see how I was doing that on that. And then this is the last little box, little circle, for strategies. So if you've got all the way through that and you still don't feel like you really have a plan, this is kind of the moment where I write a plan. For NaNoWriMo, I could, I'll make that big scenes list. I'll do my Save the Cat worksheet. None of that has yet got me to how am I going to take the hour or two a day in November to make sure that I am writing and getting those words in. So this would be, if I hadn't done that by the time I got to this would be the time I would think about that. Listing evaluation questions to ask in the shepherd stage. So the very last stage is called shepherd, and that's when we figure out how we're going to kind of evaluate how this project went and talk about how we're going to maintain it. And I sometimes find this really useful right at this stage to figure out what it is I'm going to ask myself at the end. So say that it gets me to some interesting places. So if I'm going to think about NaNoWriMo and I want it to be fun, I might make this one of my questions for my evaluation. It's going to be, was it fun? Was NaNoWriMo fun? And so if I write that question down right here at this stage, I'm likely to think about, okay, how do I make sure NaNoWriMo is fun? That it's not just about cranking those words out, that it actually feels fun to me. And I could easily get to this stage and have completely lost track that NaNoWriMo is supposed to be fun. And so asking that, knowing that I'm going to ask myself that in December, will help me start right now to make sure that I'm having a good time with it. And this is also a good time to plan a celebration for completing the project. So some way, NaNoWriMo has some built-in celebrations. If you win NaNoWriMo, you get a badge. And of course, it's always fun to share that on Facebook or a blog or other things. Often NaNoWriMo, the region, will have Thank God It's Over party, TGIO. I haven't seen one for St. Louis yet, but that might materialize yet. Just gonna let me stop this and I'll show you what I gave myself as a reward for getting this cohort up and going. I had fingerless gloves, which lots of people in NaNoWriMo use because by November, many of us are in the cold time of the year. And it can be nice to have gloves that you can still type with. So I bought these a couple weeks ago. They have a text from Pride and Prejudice in them. So I think that was a fun reward and celebration for me. All right, so we've got these questions and little tasks to go through for the planner stage. So my plan for the coming week is to go through at least the first 3 boxes of those. I may save those last 2 boxes for, we're going to have a few days the week after, before November 1st, so there'll be a little extra planner time the next week. So I think I'll probably just do the first 3 boxes, and I want to do the Save the Cat worksheet and start at least, and maybe it would be, I would feel much better about my project right now if I had my Excel spreadsheet with scenes. So want to make a real push on getting that going, and I doubt that I'll be done by this time next week, but have a good start on that. So, and then next week we will do a second week of thinking about the planner stage. November 1st is a Thursday, so we'll get started on NaNoWriMo just before that next week, and we'll go through the traveler stage about how to keep us going through NaNoWriMo or through the whole month of November for whatever project that you're working on. So that's all I have for today. Let me check and make sure no one popped into Slack. All right. So let me know if you have any questions, or post in Slack if you have any challenges that you would like some help with. And we'll do this again next week. Bye.